Hello everyone, welcome back once again to the Book of Lying. So previously we have talked about all the various nitty-gritty little pieces of circuitry that you'll probably have to get towards when you're doing some redstone. This time around I thought it would be important if we talked a little bit about memory. Now, the vast bulk of what your computer actually does is based on memory. It stores things in the random access memory, or the RAM, or it stores things inside of the hard drive, which is solid state, one would hope at least. And Redstone doesn't quite follow the same kind of mechanics in that it can pretty much run continuously based on immediate responses to an impulse, but in some cases you want to be doing other things, and either way, you're going to be ending up needing to have some form of memory. Now, it's important to address that there are two very specific kinds of memory. So there's the memory that's based on redstone torches, like these two circuits here, and then there's memory that's based on containers, such as chests and hoppers and droppers and all sorts. And these are solid state. These are more like RAM, in that if you turn off your computer, these will lose their data. Not all of the time, because Minecraft of course saves the data when it closes down, but if you built your system on, say, a chunk boundary, so for example you could see that by pushing F3 and G, then what might happen is that the signal doesn't quite get registered on relaunch, so consequently this signal doesn't reach here, so something else comes through and the system gets messed up. Whereas if you have a solid state system, all of that data is compiled inside of the container and it doesn't have any chance of changing, so that would be your solid state memory. So that's something to keep in mind as we go through these, which is that if you want a system that stays rock solid when chunks are loaded and unloaded, what you want is this. If you just want something that's running for a specific period of time and then shuts off, then you probably want more like this. But I digress. Onto the circuits. So we'll begin over here with the RS NOR latch, which is arguably the oldest redstone memory that has ever existed inside of Minecraft. The earliest forms of it existed pretty much before even repeaters were a thing. So if we just get 2 blocks, 2 torches, and 4 dust, then we have ourselves the classical RS NOR latch. And the way it works is that you put a pulse into one side, and then wherever that pulse drops later on, the power is retained. Nowadays, of course, you can sterilize the inputs using repeaters and comparators and all sorts of other things, so that you don't get the power from the RS NOR latch flowing back into whatever sent the pulse, but it still has the same properties. And this is just a really simple one wide example of how to do it. But the main thing that we have over here is the same thing. We have our 2 torches, and we have our dots coming in, so the power goes around. Now we've got 2 buttons in place of where I was just putting those torches. So we set a signal into one, power stays, button comes out. Then the other, power stays, button comes out. Very simple. It holds that signal until it receives input from its other input. It's good for controlling binary systems with 2 opposing sides. So say, for example, you want an auto-resetting timer. You would use the timer by having it pulse out whenever it hits its full status, when it's at its peak, to change the side of the RS NOR latch, and then it would seep down, creep down, decrement, if you will, until it hits the other side, and then turns this side off again. Next, we have the D latch, also known as what I always mistakenly call the RS NOR latch whenever I build one of those. This functions more like an actual computer memory circuit, in that it has a clock input. So it only updates its actual internal state whenever the clock signal is high, which is whenever it's turned on, so whenever we put a pulse into here. Otherwise, we can flip this input into whatever state we like, and nothing comes out. This is accomplished by the locking feature of repeaters, which is a fairly recent addition, and it basically means if you have a repeater sending power into the side of another repeater, that repeater does not change its state, whether that be to lose its power or gain it. And in this case, we're using it to create a very compact little D-latch. So we've got our pulse going in, we now have power in that. If I flip this off, it retains it. And you might be wondering, what is the purpose of this? Why would you particularly want this? Well, this isn't as popularly used as an RS NOR latch or a T flip-flop. I can't really lie about that. But it is useful for moments when the input coming in might change, possibly quite frequently, but you only actually want to pay attention to it at certain moments. So, say for example, when you're entering a combination to a lock and you want to make sure that someone doesn't accidentally find the combination just by virtue of setting the inputs. That's an example of when you might use a D-latch. And then we have the ever faithful and trusty T flip-flop. This is a fairly noisy version because it makes a bit of noise than that, because that has one of these empty. But simply enough, this is called a toggle latch, and it turns a temporary signal, such as this button, into a permanent signal, more like this lever. Does not match the input state, however, so this one matches the input state, this one matches the input state, this one only inverts its existing state. So no matter what pulse comes into here, it's just going to change its internal state 1 or 0. Very straightforward, and this is, with the exception of the RS NOR latch, probably the most common form of memory that you will find inside redstone circuitry. There's a number of different ways to do all of these. For example, we have our command block T flip-flop here. So here we have our little armor stand memory device, if you wish, with the tag of memory, and we are just incrementing it in the score of bit by 1 every single time that we hit the button. And if it hits 2, which is to say if it's 0 or 1 only, then we go to 0 again. And then we just test for one specific statement. We could have that be anything we wanted. If you wanted to think of a text-based storage or a more Boolean storage, so you don't have to use a ton of different objectives, you can look to something that's more like the RS NOR latch, which is more based in the tags system of scoreboards. So for example, if we were to equate that, that would be give the tag, take the tag away, give the tag, take the tag away. That's basically what we're looking at there with the scoreboard system. The difference being with the scoreboard system, we can actually detect those things remotely and freely rather than having to wait on redstone circuitry to catch up. But I gather that this might be still a little bit impenetrable for people. This is understandable that we're getting a bit more into the computer science side of things, so I have prepared a pair of handy little examples. So, over here we have a counter. This is a binary system, and it is using a series of sequential T flip-flop circuits. So every time one of them turns on, it triggers the next one in line, which might trigger the next one in line, and so on and so forth, creating a ripple effect as this clock goes around. Why might this be useful, you might think? Well, firstly, it's good for having a binary counting system, especially if you're just getting to computers and you want to know about binary logic and the like. And secondly, you'll notice that this particular one at the end takes a very long time to turn on as well as to turn off, because it has to wait for everything. It has to wait for this one to turn off, and then that has to wait for that one to turn off, and so on and so forth. That means that you can take the standard duration of your clock and multiply it. So you can create some extremely long clocks if you use some kind of counting system. And this is sort of your introduction to doing exactly that. So you need some kind of ideally solid state memory, and you need a clock feeding into it, and then you do something whenever a certain point in that timer is reached. So that is a particularly good example of using T flip-flops and such inside of a clock. And then we have the system that everyone is probably more familiar with when it comes to memory. So here we have a combination lock. It opens that door. Highly secure, I'm sure. So the combination, as we can see from the inputs up here, is 1, 2, but not 3. And we have our clock input as well. So if I hit these and that, but if I give it the wrong signal in any of these boxes, then it closes off once again. So this is using a triad of T flip-flops here to take the inputs and turn them into a steady signal, and that also means that we don't have to use levers here, so whatever code we are entering is obscured from whomever might be observing us. And we put that into some RS NOR latches. RS NOR latches? No, XNORs. Jeez, I did an episode on this. Come on. And we feed that into a sort of simplified AND gate. And here we have our D latch. So if we just had it as being immediately send the power through whenever there is a full and complete signal, then we would find that whenever we actually completed this code, say we're just hitting random buttons, then the door opens immediately, which is potentially bad depending on how you've worked your combination, which is why we're using a D latch here, because then it has to actually wait for them to say, okay, I'm done entering the combination, I'm going to test it out now. And what you could also have, if you had a more full and complete system than this, is a reset that happens whenever you hit the clock. So we would reset all of the memory in here every time it went through, once we'd actually checked if it was correct. So that is a good example of a T flip-flop and D latch in use inside of a combination system. Good, good, good. Now, you can use that as a great example of using T-flop-flops to hide the combination inputs in controllable circuits. You can also use it for turning controllable circuits into a more human understanding, or for making them a bit more tidy, so you just have buttons rather than levers all over the place, that kind of thing. But, anyways, I believe that that is the summation of what I think will be necessary for people to get some degree of idea of how memory works and how you should consider how you're using it and for what and that kind of thing. So, that is all for now. Do let me know in the comments what I should check out next, what you'd like to see explained in brief and hopefully thorough fashion, and I shall catch you all, as always, next time.